What if I told you that in the Middle Ages, people truly believed that the very air around them could kill? Not just foul-smelling air from garbage or sewage, but even a fresh breeze through your window at night. For centuries, ordinary men and women lived in fear of the invisible world around them. Before we uncover why, hit that subscribe button now and join this community where we dig into the hidden truths history doesn't want you to know. And comment below, would you have dared to breathe the night air if you lived back then? Picture this. It is the year 1349. The Black Death has swept across Europe, leaving towns silent, villages half abandoned, and the air heavy with dread. In London, bells toll every hour as carts piled with bodies rattled through the streets. Families locked their doors and shuttered their windows, not just to keep out thieves or plague doctors, but to keep out the air itself. To breathe was to invite death. To open a window was to gamble with your soul. Why? Because medieval people lived under the powerful influence of an idea known as miasma theory. According to this belief, disease spread through bad air, a kind of invisible vapor rising from rot, filth, or even the cool night breeze. People thought this poison air could seep into your skin, creep into your lungs, and rot you from within. Doctors, priests, and rulers all reinforced this idea. If someone fell ill, it wasn't blamed on rats, poor sanitation, or contaminated water. It was blamed on the air. Fresh air wasn't a cure, it was a killer. To protect themselves, people filled their homes with strong scents. Hay, burned herbs, carried flowers, and wore pomander little metal balls stuffed with spices and vinegar to filter the bad air. The wealthy paid fortunes for exotic spices like cloves and cinnamon, believing these could keep death away. Nobles would walk down the street with bouquets pressed to their noses. Even the famous plague doctor masks, with their long, bird-like beaks, were stuffed with fragrant herbs, not because they understood germs, but because they thought sweet smells could neutralize poison in the air. But for peasants, survival was far more desperate. Many stuffed rags into the cracks of their huts to keep air out entirely. Families would seal themselves inside, sharing smoky, windowless rooms with animals, convinced that stepping outside at the wrong moment could be fatal. And tragically, their fear only made things worse. With no ventilation, diseases spread faster indoors. Entire households were wiped out, not by fresh air, but by the lack of it. This fear of air wasn't just ignorance, it was also a tool of control. The church and ruling elites had every reason to reinforce it. If disease came from God's punishment, carried on the wind, then people couldn't blame kings, priests, or city councils for poor sanitation. You died, it was in tea, because your city was drowning in filth. It was because you hadn't prayed hard enough, or because God had chosen to test you. And so, the rich benefited. Nobles could afford perfumed chambers, rare spices, and masks to protect themselves. They could retreat to countryside estates where the air was fresher, and fewer people meant fewer infections. The poor, meanwhile, were trapped in sealed homes, clinging to rags dipped in wine, vinegar, or even urine, whatever they believed might ward off the deadly air. Archaeology tells us just how deeply this belief shaped medieval life. In plague pits across Europe, researchers have found bundles of herbs, flowers, and burned resins buried with the dead. Families wanted to shield their loved ones from bad air, even in the grave. City records show laws banning foul odors in public. In some towns, cutting onions or garlic in the streets was forbidden, because their smell was thought to awaken the plague. And here's a disturbing truth. People avoided fresh air, but the real killers were hiding elsewhere. Rats carried fleas, fleas carried plague, and filth bred disease. Yet, because the focus was on miasma, sanitation was ignored. Sewage continued to flow in rivers, animal waste piled in the streets, and people died while believing that the breeze was to blame. Looking back, the irony is heartbreaking. Today, We know that ventilation and fresh air actually reduce the spread of disease. Open spaces and sunlight can kill bacteria and viruses. But in the Middle Ages, the very thing that could have saved countless lives was the thing they most feared. Take monasteries, for example. Monks lived, ate, and prayed together in sealed halls filled with incense smoke and stagnant air. When plague struck, entire communities were wiped out in days. Contrast that with peasants in the countryside who worked outside every day, breathing the open air. Many of them survived longer than those locked in the safety of stone walls. But their survival was dismissed as coincidence. Not everyone agreed with miasma theory. In the Islamic world, scholars had long written about the importance of fresh air and clean water. Some early Renaissance physicians in Italy began to suggest that circulation and hygiene mattered. They argued for open courtyards, gardens, and baths, but these ideas threatened the established order. The air was in tea. The problem of sanitation was then the wealthy and powerful could be blamed for the filth of cities. So those voices were often suppressed, their manuscripts hidden or ignored. The fear of air even influenced the design of medieval homes. Windows were tiny, often sealed shut. Thick curtains and shutters blocked out breezes. Chimneys were built in ways that minimized airflow. Side castles and noble estates, rooms were perfumed with lavender, sage, and frankincense, not just for comfort, but to push back the bad air. Imagine living in such a world. To go to bed each night fearing not just thieves or famine, but the simple act of breathing. To believe that the very wind carried death. This was the reality for millions. Even when the plague wasn't raging, suspicion of air lingered. People believed that night air in particular was dangerous. Walking outside after dark was thought to invite illness. Parents warned children to stay indoors at dusk. Travelers carried charms against the breeze. For centuries, Europeans avoided open air at night, creating a culture of fear that lasted well into the 19th century. In fact, as late as the Victorian era, tuberculosis was sometimes blamed on night air. It shows just how long these medieval beliefs haunted the modern world. So, why does this matter? Because it reveals a timeless truth. Fear shapes behavior more than facts. In the Middle Ages, fear of air kept people obedient, isolated, independent on authority. It made them spend money on charms, perfumes, and rituals that offered no real protection. It blinded them to the true causes of disease and gave the powerful yet another way to rule through superstition. And here, as the haunting question, if entire civilizations could be convinced that fresh air was deadly, what false beliefs shape our world today? What do we accept as truth now truths we may laugh at centuries from now, just as we laugh at the fear of wind and night air? So the next time you step outside and take a deep breath, remember that for medieval people, that very act was unthinkable, even terrifying. They lived in a world where the wind itself was a killer, where windows were sealed shut, and where survival meant hiding from the sky. But history teaches us something powerful. The most dangerous poison is often not in the arid in the stories we are told. Subscribe now, because the truths we uncover about the past are far stranger and far more important than you've ever imagined.